good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It is like 5 p.m. there. And my name is Dhananjay Kumar, and I'm presenting this talk from India. And in this talk, we are going to learn about prototype in JavaScript. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone from JS Poland, organizing team, volunteers, and sponsors for putting up such a great conference. And I'm very sure that all of us had great learning in last 2 days. Yesterday it was all focused on Angular and today on JavaScript. So today in my talk, what I'm going to do that we are going to learn about prototype in JavaScript, and in next 25 minutes we would see into proto, this, and 4 ways of creating object and prototype chain in JavaScript and how they are interrelated to each other. So to start with, let's first understand this. First understand what is this and what is proto. So in JavaScript, when you create a function, let's say that here you have a function called product, and every function in JavaScript has a this object. And when we call this function right here, product, all right, so every function has this object, and what is the value of this object inside the function depends on how you are calling that function. Now, you can call a function in 4 ways. If you're calling a function like this, the way I'm calling it right now, this is called function invocation pattern. Means we're calling the function as a function. There's nothing before that, and we're just calling that function as a function. That is called function invocation pattern. And let me go and say here, let's return 9. Now, when you call a function as a function adhering to function invocation pattern, the value of this inside function would be the global object. Since right now I'm running JavaScript in Node.js, then Node.js global object would be the value of this. If I were running this same JavaScript in browser, then window object would be the value of this inside product in this scenario. So let's run it, and here you see that in the bottom, in the output, that Node.js global object is the value of this inside the function. So that's your learning number 1, that value of this in function invocation pattern is always the global object. Now you can go and call the same function using new. When you call the same function using new, that is, you are using the new operator, and now this function would act as a constructor. And what would happen, the value of this inside this function product would be that newly created object. And here we can see that we're getting product here printed. And also this function, when it behaves like a constructor, it ignores the return statement which you have mentioned there, and it would return the newly created object. So the second scenario for value of this is in constructor invocation pattern, newly created object. So whenever you see new before a function, it's always the newly created object, the value of this. Third is that you can call a function. A function is part of an object. Let us say that I have an object called dog here, and that object dog has name foo, and then let's say that there's a function called eat. And if you print here value of this inside that function, now this function eat becomes method of dog, and you can call that. Let me just comment this, and here you can if you try to call that it like this, you would get error because that it is only visible inside that object dog. So to call that, you need to use the object dog, and then you can say dog.eat, and here you see that value of this is that dog object. So when you call a function as a method, that is called method invocation pattern, and in the method invocation pattern, always the value of this inside the function would be the object before the dot. Clear? So this is called method invocation pattern, and let me uncomment this, and here always the value of this is object before dot. So here the object before dot is dog, so value of this inside it function is dog. When you call like this, this is called constructor invocation pattern, and value of this is newly created object. And when you call a function, let's say like this, let a equal to product as we called previously, and here it is called function invocation pattern. The value of this is global object. Now once these three scenarios is clear to you, you may notice that in all these three scenarios, where in if function invocation pattern or constructor invocation pattern or in method invocation pattern, we as a developer is not controlling the value of this. Always JavaScript returns you the value of this. Now what if inside this it method you want to pass, let's say you have another object called cat, and cat is name is my cat. What if you want to pass this cat object as the value of this inside dog's it method? For that you need to call this dog.it indirectly, and you can do that like this, dog.it.call, and here you can say that hey, pass the cat. So when you call a function indirectly using apply or call or bind, that is called indirect invocation pattern, and here the value of this is always the first argument in the function. Alright, so here the first argument in the function is cat, here you're passing. So what would happen that inside this it method the value of this would be cat. You are manually passing that. So let's go ahead and run this, and let me see that what mistake I'm doing. Okay, so dog.it.call cat. So here it would be, there should be no semicolon. So here it's saying my cat, and when you run this, you see that here you are getting for the second dog.it.call my cat. So now once it is clear to you that how to calculate value of this, and always the value of this depends on, if I can put it here, the value of this depends on how you are calling the function. And why it is important? Because in prototype chain, always you need to find out what is the value of this inside a function, or whether the object on which you are calculating the prototype is the this and all. So now once this is clear to you, next let's go ahead and see that how we can create, how prototype works. So let's say that let me here go and comment all of them. And now let's say that you have one object called var animal, and that has two properties, name foo and let's say is 9, and then you have another object called dog, and it has properties honor, and one more property can run true. Now you know that dog is an animal, and in JavaScript there's no inheritance. Even if you hear that term inheritance, there's no inheritance in JavaScript. In JavaScript you can link two objects with each other and then create a prototype chain, but there's nothing called inherit. So here, if you want to inherit, or in a more technical term, if you want to link this dog object to animal object, the one way to do that, we can use dog.proto is equal to animal. All right, so now here if you say that for var p in dog, and we are just iterating properties of dog, and let's say console.log and dog p. So here you see that you get ku, to, true, foo, 9, means all these objects, all these properties from dog, honor, and instead of this, let's print just property to understand it in better. So here we say that, hey, console.log and just p. So here you see that it has honor, can run, name and age. So what for loop does, it prints object's own properties and also properties from the prototype chain. Here if I go and remove, just comment that, now you see that it is only printing you honor and can run, because there is no link between animal and dog. So when you do this, dog.proto equal to animal, that is now animal is prototype of dog. Or you can say animal is a prototype object of dog object. And I would come to that later. And one in ES6 there is something called object.keys. So if you say that console.log object.keys, let's pass dog here. Now here you see that notice the difference that when you use for loop, it returns you object's own properties and properties from the prototypes. However, object.keys would only return you properties which is own property of the object. So here you see that object.keys only returns you honor and can run. However, for loop, in that you can go to the properties of the prototype. One more thing you need to keep in mind, that for loop or object.keys only returns you properties which are enumerable. Means if I go here and say object.define property, and here I pass dog and here I pass, let's say, honor, and then I'll say enumerable as false. So what I'm doing, I'm setting the enumerable of honor as a false using object.define property. Means that now honor property is not enumerable. And if you look at the output, you see for loop has omitted that. In for loop, you don't see that honor, and object.keys also has omitted that. You can see only can run. So both object for loop and object.keys returns you only the enumerable properties. For loop returns you from the whole prototype chain, and object.keys only returns you properties which is the own property of the object. Once you understand what is the purpose of proto, to link the objects, all right, to link object. So let's go and comment this. I'll share it later such that if you want you can refer it. Now the most popular, there are 4 ways objects can be created in JavaScript. One way you just saw, when you create objects like this, like var dog and all. When you create like this, when you create an object, that is called object literal. So there are 4 ways object can be created in JavaScript. All right, so here and those 4 ways are, one is called object literal, which you just saw, var dog, and when you create object like this, this is called object literal. The other way of creating an object is you can use object dot create. So here you can say var dog equal to object.create. When you use object.create method, you can have one object as a prototype object, or you can pass null as well. So here if I have one object dog and I want to create an object cat which is linked to dog, and I don't want to use proto, here I can pass dog. So this is the second way. This is second way of creating object in JavaScript. The third way of creating object is, of course, you can have class. You can use class to create that. And the fourth way, which we are going to cover, is using the constructor. And you have already seen that when I was explaining you value of this in the constructor invocation pattern. Now keep in mind that doesn't matter how you create an object, always the concept of prototypes are going to be the same. So let's say that I have one function called product, and that takes name, and let's say that takes title and price, and then we say this dot title is equal to title, and this dot price is equal to price. All right, now we can here say var p1 equal to new product, and let's say title is p1 and price is 90, and then var p2 new product, and then again title is p2 and let's say price is 20. Now we are using constructor invocation pattern here new, and since we are using constructor invocation pattern right here in the function product, value of this is the newly created object, and in newly created object we are adding two properties, title and price, and in constructor invocation pattern this product always returns you the newly created object. So that newly created object is assigned to p1 and p2. And this is fourth way of creating an object. So here, if you look at here and say console.log p1 dot let's say price, and then you can say console.log p2.price, and you should get the output. Now keep this code in mind where I have created a function and then I have created two objects. Now I'm going to draw a diagram, and please focus on that, and then we'll map that to our application. So here, let's say that I'm going to create represent these functions as a circle, and these objects as a rectangle. So here what I'm going to do, I draw here. Let me draw this. So here, let's say that I have that function which I just created, and that function is here, and then we have two objects, and we created those two objects right here, and these objects are p1 and p2, right? And this function is called, I quickly go and draw text. This function is called product. Now you can see that these two objects are created from this function, so I can go and draw this diagram. Okay, now p1 has its own title, which is p1, and it has its own price, which is 99. And it has its own title, which is p2, and it has its own price, which is 20, right? And these two are linked to this product because they are created using the product. So here, if you look at, go to the code here, and let's say that if you print here console.log p1.constructor, you will get that function product. And in the same way, if you go and print that p2.constructor, you will get here function product again. Means these, from this p1 to this product function, you can go through the constructor, and we can call that product as a constructor, product function as a constructor of p1 and p2. So right here you can say here that this is constructor, and then you can take here also that this is constructor. Now once this is clear to you, now in JavaScript, whenever you create a function, like here you created a function, doesn't matter how you're going to call that function. As soon as you create a function, what JavaScript does, it creates a prototype object of that function. And here I can show you, I can say that, hey, console.log product. Prototype. Okay, and I'm just going to commit this, and when you run this, you see that there is an object. So as soon as you create a function, even if you are not calling it, you are not doing anything, as soon as you create a function, JavaScript creates a prototype object of that function. What does it mean? That here I can go and draw an object just parallel to this product, and I can link this function and this product together. And as you see that I can, from this function to this, you can go through prototype. All right. So every function in JavaScript has a prototype object, regardless how you are using that function. Even if you are not using that function, as soon as you created that. So here you see that these two P1 and P2 are connected to this product function using constructor, and this object, which is the prototype object of function, if we want to navigate from P1 to that object, we can go from P1 to product and then product dot prototype. Means if we do p1 dot constructor dot prototype, we can reach from p1 to this prototype. If we do p2 dot constructor dot prototype, we can reach it here. Now let's go here and do here. You can say let's say product dot prototype dot let's take some property color, and we are saying that color is blue. Now what is happening here, we have put a property called blue on this prototype. So here there is a property color and the value of that is blue. Okay, now something interesting you notice here next. So here I'm running console dot prototype dot color equal to blue. I need to put it in the string, sorry. Yeah, so here you see that the prototype has blue. Now something very interesting, you notice it here, that I created an object, I created this object, and I'm going to comment this. Now instead of this price, let's say that I want to print color. So when I print color for P1 and P2, you notice it here that you are getting blue and blue. But if you go to the prototype chain, P1 does not have color property and P2 also does not have color property. Means what is happening, that this P1 and P2 has access to somehow, this P1 and P2 has access to that prototype object, and that's the reason we are able to read that. Right? And why? Because they actually, when you create this P1 and P2, it looks like that is created through the product function, but actually these P1 and P2 are created through product function, of course, but they are linked to the prototype of product function. So when you create a function in JavaScript, when you create an object in JavaScript using constructor, that object is linked to prototype of the constructor. Right? So this statement is very important, very important. You need to keep in mind. And due to this statement only, even if P1 and P2 does not have color property, you are able to read that. So what is happening, that what JavaScript does, whenever you try to read a property, so on the P1 you are trying to read color is not here. So what JavaScript does, since you are reading that property, it first try to find that in the P1 object. If it does not find it, it would go to the prototype chain, it would go to the prototype object and try to find that property. If that property exists, it would print that value. Otherwise it would go further, it may have its own prototype object and so on, up to the object dot prototype, and if it does not find it, it will print you undefined, and this is called prototype chain. So now here, if you print here, let's say that console dot log p1 dot constructor dot prototype is equal to p2 dot constructor dot prototype. And if you look at the diagram here, this p1.constructor.prototype and p2.constructor.prototype are exactly same. So here we should get true. Right now, since this is a large, this path like from P1 you are going to constructor and then you are going to prototype again, you can directly go from here these objects to its prototype using something which you learned in the first lesson today. You can directly go from here using proto. We learned that, and this is last demo for today. So you can say console.log p1.constructor.prototype is equal to p1.proto, and here you see that both are same. And if you look at here, p1.constructor.prototype is equal to p1.proto. And as you saw in the first demo that when you create an object, always it is linked to some another object. So even though it looks like this p1 and p2 is created from product function constructor, they are linked to the prototype of that function. One last thing in last 1 minute, that in the prototype, JavaScript only goes in the prototype chain when you perform the read operation. For write operation, it does not go. What does it mean here is that, let me just go and come in this, and here you have p1.color and p2.color, you are getting blue and blue. What if before this, after this, I say p1.color equal to red? Now when you do that, look at the output. For p1.color you get red and for p2.color you get blue, because when you do the write operation, JavaScript does not go to the prototype chain. What it will do, it will try to find that property. If it does not find it, it will go here and add dot property, and here it added red. So in write operation it adds then and there, it does not go to the prototype chain, and you added that due to line number 74, and then when you are reading that in line number 75, JavaScript starts reading from P1, it finds the value of color red and it prints it, and it never goes to the prototype chain. And for P2, however, it does not find it, it goes to the prototype object and then prints that value. So if you want to print the value blue from P1, what you can do, and you might have guessed so far, that you can say that P1.proto.color, and here you can get blue and blue. All right, so this is what all I have. I'll share this diagram. Once again, my name is Dhananjay Kumar, and on Twitter I am debug_mode, and my email address is debugmode@outlook.com. Feel free to reach me there, and I hope you find this session useful. Thank you so much. Once again, thank you for organizers, volunteers, sponsors, and all of you. Thank you.